Welcome everybody to chapter 21 in the Chronicles of Corona. We've been each week putting in a new chapter into these chronicles as we journey through the land of Corona. This began as an effort to connect across the planet as we live in the land of the coronavirus now. So we've been visiting with people. We've gone to Germany, Hawaii, California, Maine. We've gone to New Orleans, Louisiana. We've gone today to Connecticut, to Silver Lake, Connecticut. And I am very pleased to introduce to you the Reverend Ryan Gackenheimer, and he is the managing director at Silver Lake Conference Center. So welcome, Ryan. Did I get all your title right?
Yes, it is changing, but that is good for now.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So Ryan, as I just told you a little bit ago, part of in these chronicles, because it's inspired by the Chronicles of Narnia, everybody gets to choose their heroic name. And I didn't know if you'd thought of what you'd like to be as your heroic name in the Chronicles of Corona.
Yeah, so one of my favorite movies is The Matrix and the Matrix trilogy. And I think it would be a little pretentious for anyone to claim Neo as their name. So I will take Morpheus. And Morpheus played the role of, in some ways, he has a lot of parallels to Moses, in that he was guiding on the journey. He was doing the discerning, envisioning something new, and also looking forward to a new horizon of what could be, what could come next, and how might the community live into something new.
So as Morpheus, how does that connect with the life you're living in this land of Corona?
Yeah, so that has a lot to do with my context here at Silver Lake. So during the summertime, we are a summer camp for youth 4th through 12th grade. Each camper comes for a week. We run 7 weeks of camp, and this season we did not get to operate. So we were not able to welcome our nearly 1,000 campers to our summer here. We were not able to welcome our 50 summer staff that come and stay for about 10 weeks. And we also didn't get to welcome our almost 300 volunteers that come every summer and stay for a week. And part of going to camp is being transformed. And so that transformation that happens didn't get to happen in the same way this summer. So a big part of what we did as a ministry was reimagine, how do we share God's love when we can't gather? The thing we do best is sharing God's love in person. From the moment you step on site in that hospitality to the camper who's struggling and is finding out for the first time God loves them just the way they are, no matter what, just because they are and because of who they are. And so we had to re-envision, how do you do that from afar? What could that possibly look like? Part of our why as a ministry is encountering God's love in creation. And so had to be creative in thinking about creation, because usually we think about this incredible, beautiful sight that we're immersed in for a week, in the world, the normal world that we're used to kind of steps away for a moment, and instead you get to immerse yourself in this beautiful context of intentional Christian community. And so we had to find a new way to live into that love. And part of the core of Silver Lake are what we call the Silver Lake loves, which are love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself, and love creation. So we took 4 weeks of Silver Lake at Home program, and with our incredible program director, Jen Clark, created an entirely new program for campers to do at home. Much of that was with their family and actually being outside in their own community. So having a chance to be immersed in creation and encounter God in their own local piece of creation, rather than coming to Silver Lake to do that. And then there were also some components where we gathered as a community virtually. There were activities at home that folks do, but then also could log on and see folks in their places doing it as well, whether that was growing a wildflower garden or joining our chef who was making s'more bars in the kitchen here at Silver Lake and teaching you how to do that at home, so you'd have the recipe and could make those all summer and have that little piece of camp experience. And so that, and then we had a campfire each Friday for a chance to gather, to sing songs together, to have one of our chaplains. We had a weekly chaplain, even though we weren't physically gathering, who would deliver a little message and offer a prayer. And so a lot of the routines that we would have in the summertime, we were able to do on Friday. And then at the end of the summer, just yesterday, actually, we did a huge worship service and end of summer celebration where we looked back at the summer, but also celebrated what is to come and the opportunity and the different ways campers at home and across the internet were able to share God's love with one another. So that kind of journey that is transformed that we have gotten pretty good at doing over the last 60 years here at Silver Lake, we had to completely reimagine how to live into that sharing of God's love and how do we reimagine community if we can't physically gather. So we had cabin groups and campers by age group had two counselors that joined them, and they had activities, and each week they focused on the theme of love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, or love creation, and just got a chance to play together and get to know some new friends and develop some relationship even from afar.
How many of these things do you think you'll continue? Will you continue them for next year or maybe even through the winter?
That's a great question. That's actually a conversation we're having. Some of it will definitely continue. One of the things that we have been doing for about 10 years is an activity we call Christmas at the Lake, which is a weekend retreat after Thanksgiving, which is usually at the very beginning of December, sometimes end of November. And campers come 4th through 8th grade, 2 different groups there, and they get a chance to just celebrate the magic, the power, the importance, and the love of Christmas in a place that they love. So they come to the lake, and for a weekend, we get to do Christmas at the beginning of December to kind of kick off Advent. And we're already imagining that we won't be able to gather safely for that event. So we're thinking about what would it look like to do Christmas at the lake, or maybe even expand it into Advent from the lake at home and journey with families. So being intentional about not repeating what churches are already doing with incredible Advent programming and things, but is there something special we could offer? Could we gather cabin groups once again around Christmas that have that theme of God's love coming into the world in a new way and celebrate that with one another? So that's definitely one place we want to continue some of the learnings from this time. And we're also thinking about what would it look like to do cabin groups throughout the year to actually, for those campers who want to stay connected with other campers because they don't get to see them, they live far away or whatever that is. We're thinking about, might we have monthly groups or even groups that meet every other week and go throughout the year. So thinking about how do we re-envision Silver Lake and at home throughout the year and not just in this bizarre, hopefully once in a lifetime bizarre summer.
So the cabin groups, people who would otherwise be together, are they self-assigned or are they assigned by the staff to a cabin? And then do they get a special theme that they're doing? How do the cabin groups work?
Yes, so they signed up by age, and we gave them a couple of different time slots based on our volunteers. And so they said we could meet on the Tuesday group and the Tuesday, Thursday at 10 o'clock group, or the Tuesday, Thursday at 3 o'clock group. And so then based on trying to have even-ish numbers in there, the staff assigned them to those cabin groups. So for the most part, the campers didn't know each other. So it was a lot like a normal week of camp where you come in and you don't know your cabin mates. And so you got to meet a bunch of new folks that way in terms of that. And then the themes that we used were the themes we had for the entire summer. Each one, the first week was love God, then love your neighbor, love yourself, and love creation. So that was the theme that they had to work with during that week, and the counselors shaped the conversations and activities within. And we did use the curriculum that is an ecumenical curriculum that we've been using for a long time called Inside Out. And we used some of the resources from that all of the counselors had access to that to get prayers, and we were actually able to adapt some of the games and activities that were designed for in-person at camp to do them virtually and translate to that setting as well. So a lot of adapting of resources that already existed, and so because we didn't want to waste that great resource, we found some ways to use the brilliant folks that put that together.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So you took in-person contact kind of games and made them virtual.
Yep.
You have it recorded? I'd love to learn from your camp. That's cool.
We actually do. So this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but our program director, Jen, had to design a whole new counselor training because we have training that we've established and continue to update every year, but because it was virtual, we had to do a whole new safe camp kind of training to go with it. And one of those things was all of the Zoom sessions were recorded. So while we had 2 counselors, 2 adults in there at all times, we had it recorded just in case something happened, whether a camper had a problem at their house and we needed to help them, or if somebody said something unfortunate, we had a record of it. So we actually do have a recording of all of the great activities, which just one of the fun ones, it's kind of a classic camp activity, is to bring something, grab something from your cabin that you brought with you to camp that represents who you are. So for some folks, that may be your stuffed animal. It could be your favorite pair of socks, or your baseball hat that you love for your team that you've been playing on for a couple of years. So instead of just what they brought to camp, they got to sort through their house and bring something that represented who they were, which actually makes it harder, because then you have to be concise down to one thing, and then they tie that into the theme. So the one I saw, I think, was for love yourself. And so it was bring something that represents what you love about yourself. So not just represents you, but what you love about yourself. And so so it was a really neat way to see some insights and get to know the campers, get to know each other, and for the counselors get to know them as well. So.
Amazing. So some very creative ideas that came out of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So as the pandemic continues, will the camp have any activities through August?
We are in a phase of transition right now. So we've actually opened up so we can do day visits. So we have it available for a family or roommates to sign up and use the outside space at Silver Lake. So they can come walk the trails. They could come and do a picnic. If they want to bring their own basketball, they can shoot hoops, those kinds of things. Bring a lawn chair and go sit down by the waterfront and just enjoy the breeze and the waves coming in. And we're in the final phases of getting ready to be able to welcome family groups to come on retreat. So to use some of our cabins that are winterized year-round buildings and have their own kitchen, the family will be able to come, stay in the building for a couple of days, cook their own meals, and be at Silver Lake on retreat in that way. So that'll happen before the end of August, but still another week out. And then as we roll out of August into September, we expect to be welcoming a couple of small retreat groups that are already meeting as different components, and they'll be coming and being here.
And for a small group, what are the precautions you have to take for them?
Yeah, so a variety of things. So Connecticut has said that lodging space, which we're identifying ourselves as a lodging like a hotel or something, even though we're not the same, needs to be at 50% capacity. And so instead of having a building that could normally house 55, our building houses a max of 22 people at a time, but then the beds also have to be 6 feet apart. So one of our buildings that very comfortably with bunk beds sleeps 32 will only be able to take 8 people, because the beds need to be 6 feet apart and in an airspace bubble. And so it creates a challenge in some ways. So those are some precautions. Even into September, for the most part, the groups will be cooking for themselves. So they'll be really self-contained. We're working on a food service plan, which will be basically a to-go meal. So the food service will have stations in the kitchen where you just work in your little area to cut down on traffic. The staff traveling even around each other, and then we'll prep the food and we'll deliver it to them. Of course, we'll all be wearing masks and gloves, which, because I'm outside, I get to take my mask off. But other than if I'm in my personal office, staff are wearing masks anytime we're in a building other than our physical individual offices. And so we're asking guests to carry masks even when they're walking around outside, because if they come up alongside another staff member, even from a distance, we want them to have their mask ready to go, so that we can say hi, but safely from a distance with our mask. So we're definitely working on the side of more cautious in terms of opening up, as some camps in Connecticut have already opened for guest groups. And in New Jersey, I have colleagues, they've been open for over a month in terms of welcoming families. And we're going much slower to see and try to be as safe as we can.
Yeah, the camp in Georgia that made the news is very strong on my mind. One teenager and then 260 people. Yeah. So caution seems like a smart way to go.
Yeah.
Now, part of your ministry is about care for the earth and recognition of the blessing of creation. You'd mentioned that some of the kids, the campers, have planted maybe some gardens or wildflowers. How's that gone?
Yeah, that's been great. The Love Creation Week, which was week 4 of the summer program, so just this past week in July, we had a pollinator garden that the campers planted at home. And so they actually had a little greenhouse kit that they planted in week 1 and then watered. My son, we did it at home with him, and it only, because of the greenhouse factor, it only takes about a week for them to be 3 or 4 inches, and then the lid, you pop the lid off. And so just the joy of watching these flowers grow. So the idea was then they would plant them outside, and some of them are, I always do it wrong, perennials. So they would come up each year and get to see the flowers and be reminded of their Silver Lake at home experience as well. So they did that at home. We invited them to garden as well. One of the things that all of our campers get to do in the summertime is they get to compost. So we have a pretty sizable garden here at Silver Lake, and we compost after all of our meals. So every camper brings the food up, and they all actually get a turn to weigh the compost. We have 4 different buckets: food that could have been eaten and can be composted but wasn't, food that wasn't eaten but couldn't be composted, and then food scraps that can't be eaten but can be composted, like the peel of an orange, and then water. And so we weigh that to see how much food was wasted, so that we can be intentional and conscious of, are we taking just enough on our plates and not more than we need? And then by the middle of the summer, after the campers get to take the compost out and turn it, by the middle of the summer, the bottom of the compost pile is 140 degrees. And so they get to see the needle on the thermometer go up and realize, wow, this is really going to be something that's in the garden next year. So we have a small version of our garden going this year. Instead of having our dedicated summer staff person running that, our program director is kind of the lead person on it, but I'm watering and days in between, and our chef has planted a couple things in there as well, and she's been doing garden updates to let campers know what's going, and also the challenges of not having as much traffic as normal. We've had lots of wildlife enjoying the garden and lost a large portion of the garden, but that's also part of the beauty. This summer has been incredibly quiet with humans, but it's been really active with animals. We have a baby deer that doesn't know to be scared of humans, and actually walked up and rubbed on our administrator as she was walking into the office. It just walked up and rubbed like it was a little kitty. So the beauty trait out there is we've been able to share a lot of incredible photos from camp that we don't normally get to take, because it's filled with the joy of humans.
How interesting. Now, in that joy of humans, and with your son, you said, was planting his garden and growing,
Yeah.
how are things in your little family while you're trying to do work and trying to keep connected with other people? How's that for your family at home?
Yeah, it has been a little complicated. So our son Keaton is 5 years old, and so he was in kindergarten this year. And my spouse Abby is also a pastor, and Abby is fortunate for us, between calls and the search and call process right now, she, by her first profession, was an educator. So she's a professional educator. So she was able to make the transition pretty easily to schooling Keaton at home when that transition for us. Now in Connecticut is still figuring out if it's going to open back up online, what that's going to look like. The challenge for us is 2 of the 3 of us in our house are immunocompromised. So Keaton will not be allowed to go back to school right away, even if they do start in person, because we need to figure out what's that going to look like. How's it going to go in the school? One school system that just opened up this week had 1 student who had COVID-19, and it spread real quick through the school. So we've seen that happen, unfortunately, in another area. So we're watching to see what that looks like. So we know the start of school will definitely be at home for him. So we're being even more cautious at home than probably most households, trying to be intentional to keep the other 2 safe in that time. But we are also incredibly blessed, and we do not miss the blessing that we have of living in an outdoor ministry site. And so he and I get to walk the sites a couple days a week. We come down and walk through camp and go for a walk just to make sure that everything, the tree limbs are all supposed to be still on the trees where they belong, and that there aren't any doors that have blown open. And so we get to get out and walk, see beautiful sunsets on the lake, or go for a bike ride around camp, things like that. So we've been able to enjoy some space and get out and play that we don't normally do, because it's usually filled with campers and it's their space during that time. But also a year
And it's really windy up there. There are a few times we can't hear you. I think for the most part, I can catch what you're saying. And is it always that windy at this time of year?
Yeah, so we have a fairly steady flow, at least in my 5 years of summer. So the first part of the summer, so the first 2 to 3 weeks of camp, we tend to get still rain. So that would be the end of June into the beginning of July, and then it gets hot for us, and so that means up into the 90s and sometimes even hitting 100. And then you usually have a week, which would be, it's usually last week, so about week 5 for us, where the evening stays in the 70s, so it doesn't really cool down at night enough that you feel comfortable. And then we start to get the strong shower warnings, and today was one of those strong shower warnings where we had red on the radar. And because of, we're right at the bottom of the Berkshires, and there's another smaller range just to the east of us, we have rogue storms that will disappear right around us and not hit us. And then other times they'll magically show up only over camp and be really strong and windy and rain really hard and be nowhere else. So it's really unique weather patterns that happen here, but it gets pretty windy this time of year as well. And so it'll come and go.
So when you and your son are out there walking, looking for tree branches or blown out doors, that's a reality for you and an expense.
Oh yeah.
How does the camp handle that in a time when you don't have paying guests?
Yeah, I actually we lost a tree this morning, or last night, that I found this morning, and saw our site manager this morning from a distance, and he said he was out on the deck and he heard a crack, and then eventually he saw where the sound was coming from and saw it fall down. So it was probably about an 18-inch diameter tree that came down, and it broke a window on our garage, but didn't do significant damage. So it'll be easy to replace the glass for that one. So we're trying to be as creative and careful as we can with our resources. We have been very fortunate as a part of the now the Southern New England Conference. So historically, Silver Lake Conference Center was part of the Connecticut Conference United Church of Christ, and as of the beginning of 2020, the Connecticut Conference, Massachusetts Conference, and Rhode Island Conference of the United Church of Christ are now the Southern New England Conference United Church of Christ. So I'm still getting used to the new name, but as a new conference, we've been fortunate that Silver Lake has not had to furlough any staff and have been able to continue with our staff just really being very creative in how we've reimagined the work we're doing, like Silver Lake at Home, but also some other work planning for the what's to come when we shift and re-engage with retreats. And then also we've had an incredible support from our families. We, like a lot of camps, invited our families, if they were able and willing, to donate a portion or even all of the deposit that they had put towards their summer camp. And many of our families were able to donate some or a lot of that, which has been a big, significant portion of our going forward, and our resources come in that way.
Now, what about internationally? I know out here, our camp has a lot of international staff as well as international campers. How is it for Silver Lake?
Yeah, we usually have 2 to 3 international staff, which is a smaller portion for us. We hire between 45 and 50 staff each summer. And so the vast majority of those staff are from the United States. We generally could hire all 45 to 50 of them from the local area, people that grew up at Silver Lake or have had some time here, but intentionally include folks internationally for their experience, but also to get their exposure and have that opportunity coming here. So I actually spent a summer at Insitson as a managing director doing an internship during seminary. So I have worked with some of the international staff there at Insitson and seen the balance. That summer, I think about half of our staff were international staff. So it's an important part of the ministry there, and it's an important part of our ministry, but smaller. So we actually had one of our staff members who was coming from Poland already had her visa before they shut down the visa program because she applied early enough. But then, of course, they then shut down any international travel, and then camp didn't happen. So we've already extended an offer to those 3 staffers that if they would like to come back next summer, then they're welcome to to be a part of staff, and we'd love to have them. So we're hoping that that happens next summer. There's of course still a lot of wild cards, whether folks will be able to travel internationally and whether it'll be safe for them to come or whether they'll still want to come, depending upon what the United States looks like next summer. So our hope is we'll be able to have them again next summer. We generally don't have many international staff that come, or sorry, international campers that come during our programming. However, the week after we finish our program here at Silver Lake, we have another camp that comes in called Sigma Camp, which is a science camp. And somewhere between a third and a half of their campers come internationally. So they have a very diverse population of campers coming from all across the United States as well as around the world. And so obviously as a camp, they didn't run, but it also meant that they weren't able to have all of their international campers come and have the experience of being here either. So it was a big impact for them as well as us.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sure is great to talk to you out there in that beautiful location, such a godly place. Is there any other thing that you want to be sure people out there in the land of Corona know about the experience at your part, that saying about how we're all in the same storm but not in the same boat? Anything else about your boat you want to tell us?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily anything that we as individuals get to control, but Connecticut was one of the states that was really slow and intentional about reopening and one of the first to really, really lock things down. And so far, that is showing really positive return in that Connecticut had, for the last about month, I think, has had one of the lowest per 100,000 people rates. And so just offering some patience and grace, because it's hard not going anywhere and engaging with folks, but Connecticut has been pretty good even in the reopening about folks being pretty careful and cautious, and it seems to be working. So just offering some hope that other places are able to, so even if that means dial some things back, to step back and slow things down, because it really does seem to make a difference, and find ways to be patient. And then of course, reaching out. Part of the beauty of our time in terms of technology is we're able to connect and use technology. So as a conference, we've actually been using Zoom for about 3 years on a regular basis. So I've been on Zoom every week for 3 years. So this was a little bit more than normal, but not a huge transition for us. So using those resources to connect with folks, especially folks who may not even be able to turn their video camera on, but can click the link, is really important to connect with those family and friends who may be feeling really lonely right now, because those are also oftentimes the folks for whom it's not safe to get out and visit with others even from a distance. And so checking in on folks is still really important, even as some of us are able to get outside and do a little more.
Sure appreciate you being here. Thank you for that good word of advice and a reminder for people to be checking in on each other and taking this opportunity to be at camp with one another while we're camping in our own homes. So thank you. So again, that was chapter 21. Delighted to have with us the Reverend Ryan Gackenheimer, and looking forward to next week for chapter 22. If you have someone you'd like to volunteer to be interviewed from their place in this land of Corona, do let me know. And until next time, may all peace and good be with you. Bye-bye for now.